Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with who knows what number of my catch-up wrap-ups. I can't tell you these are all the books I read in April because I didn't read that many, so I'm just doing it all in one part, and let's just get into the books. Content warnings and links are in the description. I also want to mention that these earrings are by Annalisa Ely. I really love them. They're super cute, and I also have to brag a little bit because you can't really see it because of the frame, but I finished this top. I knit it myself, and I love it. So, okay, let's get into the books. First, I finished Ice Cream and Politics by Christy N. Warner. This is a fairly short poetry collection, and specifically, I picked this up because of one of the prompts I got for Mel's Roll of Reads, and it was the random country generator, and then you had to read a book by an author from that country. And so one of the ones that I got, because I rolled that twice, was Namibia, and I have never read a Namibian author before, as far as I know, so that was very cool. Christy N. Warner is Namibian, and this is a poetry collection that she wrote. I'm trying to think of some unifying themes to give you of what these poems cover. I'd say a lot of personal, perhaps semi-biographical, also about her country of Namibia, deals with relationships a lot, and I have not actually rated this one because this is one of those books where I think the cultural context is so important to understanding and enjoying these poems that it doesn't feel fair for me to give it a star rating. So I'm not going to do that because I just think that, yeah, I don't know enough. I don't have the cultural context to really appreciate this. Apparently Christy Warner is a songwriter, and I actually think there were a lot of poems in here that I think would have been even more effective as song lyrics, if they were, set to music and performed. Next, I finished a short story collection that is The Beadworkers by Beth Pietote. She is a member of the Nez Perce Nation. So this is a pretty short collection. It's actually just under 200 pages, and I absolutely loved this. These are a lot of the stories are contemporary or historical, but I think there might be a couple other genres as well. Actually, the last story in the collection is a retelling or reimagining of Antigone, which you guys might know is one of my favorite plays, and specifically it is using the framework of the Antigone story to talk about ancestral remains and Native people wanting to have those back, to get them back from museums and different places. And I thought that was an absolutely incredible retelling. I thought it was so well done, so smart. Yeah, this whole collection was fantastic. Beth Pietote has this incredibly beautiful and poetic style, but that's paired with these characters and situations that feel so down to earth and so ordinary in the best way. Her characters feel like people that we all know or that we could meet. And to have that filtered through a writing style that is so beautiful was just a really cool experience. I really liked the way that those things came together. And I also think that this collection does a really fantastic job of being both very specific but also very universal, because a lot of all of these stories are so steeped in the cultural background of these characters and of the specific situations and time periods and everything. All the stories have this fantastic specificity to them. The characterization is also very specific, so they feel very intentional. The stories aren't just vague or general, but at the same time, the way that Beth Pietote writes about these emotions and these relationships, there's one story that is about a sort of extended family coming together for to visit one of the sons in the hospital, and the way that talks about love and relief and being hurt, it's so beautiful. There's also so much humor in these. Several of the stories in particular were absolutely hilarious, but just in general I really loved Beth Pietote's humor. It's very dry and biting in the best way, but again, that's paired with these really compassionate stories. I thought this was incredible. I gave The Beadworkers 5 stars. I definitely look forward to reading more by this author. Next, I finished A Rome of One's Own by Emma Southen. The subtitle is The Forgotten Women of the Roman Empire, which is a pretty good description of what this is. This is a nonfiction book that is taking different women from the Roman Empire, some of them much more well-known than others, and they're sort of mini biographies, and it's Emma Southen taking the scant resources that we have about these women, and telling their story, fitting them into their cultural context, into their history, and basically just giving them the importance and the attention that they should have had, but didn't because they were women. And so, of course, you know, nobody thought it was important to write anything about them down, hardly. Oh, my bookmark is still in here. So you guys know I have loved Emma Southon. I've read, I think, all of her nonfiction books that she currently has out, apart from like a university press one. I really love the feminist take that she has on Roman history. I really, really love her humor. I think it probably could be too much for some people. She's like very sarcastic, like she points out the like ridiculous situations that happened in history. But also, like I always say, one of the things I appreciate is that when she's talking about things that are serious or that are heartbreaking, you know, some of the tragedies that these different people faced, those parts she doesn't make light of. She takes those seriously, which I like. That's something that's important to me. And I also like that she doesn't hide the fact that she has a perspective. Like, I don't think that nonfiction writers should pretend that they don't have an opinion about what they're saying. What I appreciate is knowing what is their opinion versus like what is, you know, in the primary sources or something. Because like a lot of times we do have to make sort of inferences about what may have happened because of like missing documents or like, you know, nobody thinking that a woman's life was worth writing down and things like that. So I think Emma Southon does great with that. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed the way that she like told these stories like chronologically and kind of used that to like show the overall picture of the Roman Empire. The one negative for me is one of those things that is very much in the category of like, this is the personal thing, and probably a lot of readers wouldn't be that bothered by it or even notice it necessarily. So the one exception to what I have said about Emma Southon being so compassionate, even in the way she talks about, you know, some of these people who did absolutely abhorrent things. She doesn't excuse those things, but she talks about these people in a very humanizing way, while again, still holding them accountable for things that they did. So my only exception to that I found in this book is that there were one or two chapters, one in particular, but I think this happened in like, maybe one or two other sections. But the only exception to that is when Emma Southon was talking about this young girl who was one of the early Christian martyrs, for the Roman Empire, because for a while it was illegal to be a Christian, and they had these like very public, very bloody, brutal like executions by animals. So one of the like mini biographies is about this young girl, and the tone, like the way that Emma Southon talked about her specifically, it got my hackles up. Like it was very off-putting and very like judgmental feeling from her, I think. So I talk about this in my Goodreads review as well, but like obviously there were and are many terrible things done by the church, and I'm not asking Emma Southon to gloss over that, but it was specifically the way that she like talked about and viewed like sort of, I mean, like the tone, the way that she like was so disdainful of this girl and like of some of these other people's like choices, that just really rubbed me the wrong way. And also there is definitely a conversation to be had about the church's like fixation on especially young female martyrs. Absolutely, that is something we can discuss, but I don't think that's what she was doing here. Yeah, I just call it like Southon's obvious distaste for these women's choices and beliefs, and it really stood out because, again, that is not something that Emma Southon does in any of the other biographies and either of the other books I read from her. Like, it just felt very much like Emma Southon viewed this girl and anybody in these positions as like perhaps not so intelligent, or at the very least like brainwashed, which like I think the people who killed them are more responsible than like the victims are, you know? And then also like there were some parts of it that felt like, in my opinion, just like overgeneralizations that I didn't think made sense. So for example, she talks about the ways that the spread of Christianity like further limited women's options. And like, again, I want to make it clear that I am not denying the many things that the church has done that have hurt women and that they continue to do that hurt women. I'm not like trying to discount any of that. But I thought it was odd that in this book, Emma Southon doesn't talk about the fact that while yes, there are some parts of Roman history where those things are true, there actually is a kind of counterexample that like in the very early Roman church, women actually had access to, like Christian women specifically, had access to opportunities that other Roman women didn't. Like, not that it was like a feminist utopia or anything. And I don't even mean like examples that you might need like some specific like religious beliefs to, I don't know, think are convincing. Like, for example, the first disciples who were at the resurrection being women. Like, that is a very specific belief that you have if you are a Christian. So I don't even mean stuff like that. I mean like secular historical records. Like, we know that Christian women were preaching, were living in communities that other Roman women would not have been able to. So anyway, there's like that one caveat, which again, it was only in like 1 or 2 chapters, but it was very surprising compared to all of the other things that I love about Emma Southon's writing and the way that she does write with so much like compassion and understanding and empathy. All of that ramble/rant aside, I did really enjoy A Rome of One's Own. I still love Emma Southon and I'm excited to read other things by her. This book, just compared to her others, there was that what I consider like a gap in the things that I usually love about her writing. So I gave A Rome of One's Own 4.5 stars. But again, still love it. And like I said at the beginning of the review, I think my issue is something that a lot of people, like it wouldn't affect your experience. So that is also a factor. Next, I finished Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick. This is a nonfiction book that, as is often the case with nonfiction, it pretty much tells you what the topic is in the title. It is about specifically how pro-Palestinian sentiment seems to be like the one exception for progressive and leftist politics in the US. Like, somebody could be incredibly liberal and progressive on every other issue, but it's not uncommon for that person to still be very anti-Palestine. And I thought this was really, really excellent. I actually feel like this is a really accessible overview of the history of Palestine and, again, like pro-Palestinian activism and the way that that is viewed in the US in a way that is kind of unique. It does a lot of great like myth busting about like some common misconceptions people have about Israel or Palestine or the relationship between the two. Like, for example, this book points out that the belief that like being pro-Palestine or like even the Palestinian people themselves wanting a safe homeland, that means that they want to like eradicate like all Israeli Jews or Israeli people, and that is like absolutely not the case. So there's a lot of like kind of pushing back against like myths or misconceptions like that. It also talks a lot about just the history of Palestine and how we got here. This book, I should mention, was originally published in 2021, so it doesn't cover the current suffering that is happening in Palestine, but it is fairly up to date aside from that. And I think one of the things that the book also does a really good job with is like the title itself being Except for Palestine. Like, it really points out the weird double standard for leftist politicians in America. Like, it talks about how like Palestinian freedom is the exception when it shouldn't be to so many values professed by progressives or professed by, you know, different like international bodies. Like, for example, the way, like the section where it talks about the way that the BDS movement is villainized in the US, like so boycott, divest, and sanctions, it's like a purely economic strategy. Like, it is all about nonviolent pressure, nonviolent protest, which should supposedly be acceptable to the US government, but it isn't. It is like viewed as, they might have even called it like a pro-terrorist movement at some point. The vocabulary around it and the like policy and laws around BDS is different from any other like boycott or any other like economic like pressure, any other kind of movement that is geared towards like financial, like using financial means to create social change. Like, the way that BDS is talked about and is like legislated around in the US is very bizarre. And I don't use the word bizarre to like undercut how serious it is, just to point out how, again, it's so strange that it's like the exception here. And as I said at the beginning, I really feel like even though this book covers so much, it does it in a way that is incredibly clear and easy to follow. I think the sections are well organized. I think the like flow of like the ideas makes a lot of sense. I think it does a great job of like using the historical like information, like the facts, the history, while also doing like the commentary or the analysis piece of it and kind of putting all that together. Oh, I also should mention that I listened to this one on audio as well. I think the narrator was Paul Boehner, and I thought he did a really great job with that. You can probably guess from the review, but this book does deal very specifically with sentiment and policy regarding Palestine and Israel in the US. So like it is very American focused, but I think a lot of the like the history and the analysis and everything is definitely widely applicable. And I even think some of the like specific sections about the like view of these different like movements or ideas, I think that probably could apply to some other countries as well. But yeah, I thought this was really excellent. There were a couple of like little things that I wanted like more of, like especially like for example, I think that the conclusion section of this was really excellent in the way that it like pulled some things together, and again it sort of addressed these like misconceptions or like bad faith arguments. Like the conclusion is where the authors talk about briefly how like being anti-Zionist does not mean you are anti-Jewish, and actually that there are a ton of Jewish people and organizations that are very dedicated to having a free Palestine. And so that was something that I actually would have liked to see even more of throughout the book, because I think it's relevant and I think it's important. And also just to reiterate that this was published in 2021, so I think the authors were perhaps less focused on for example, like criticizing Hamas than they probably would have been if this had been, you know, published or updated later. But that is not a critique of the book, because obviously, like, it was published before. So anyway, overall, I thought this was really, really excellent. I would definitely recommend it. Like, I don't think it would just be useful for people just kind of starting to read more about Palestine, but if you are somebody who is like looking for somewhere to get started, I do think this would be a really excellent place to do that, because of how accessibly it's written, how well it's written and put together, and just like the really strong arguments and examples they use. So 5 stars for Except for Palestine. Next, I finished The Scarlet Circus by Jane Yolen. This is one of her collections of short stories. It's sort of like a series in terms of they have a similar like vibe and format, but they're not like, her collections aren't connected to each other at all. And this one is specifically like romantic fantasy, or they're like fantasy stories that have some kind of romance element. That doesn't always mean it's like a romantic story, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I've read one of her collections before, which I overall really enjoyed. There were 1 or 2 stories that I had some big issues with, but like as a whole, I just really enjoyed her writing and the kinds of ideas she had, and here I feel like that happened as well. I just really love the way that Jane Yolen writes. Like even the stories where I like wasn't as pulled in by the premise or the characters, I just love the way that she tells a story so much. Like it's a very like smooth reading experience, but her writing still has a lot of like character and like interest to it. Some of the stories I actually really enjoyed in this one. Like a couple of my favorites were Unicorn Tapestry and The Sword and the Stone one, which was a surprise for me. And I also ended up really liking Dragonfield, which was kind of a surprise as well. And there were others that I really liked as well. As I said with the Emerald Circus, there's like one story that just has some like really just off-color elements. Like specifically in this one, it's like an Orientalism and just like xenophobia problem that like it was just very weird. None of the other stories had that happen, but the story with the djinn was just very uncomfortable to read. So yeah, that kind of lessened my enjoyment of this a little bit, but in general I really enjoyed the collection. I also really loved the notes and the poems that she has at the back, which she also did in her other collection I've read. I really like her poetry writing as well, so I ended up giving The Scarlet Circus 4.5 stars. I know that these collections seem to be very polarizing for people, but like so far at least I've been enjoying them. Again, barring those exceptions where just like once in a while there'll be a story where I'm like, why? But overall really liked that. And then finally, the last book I finished in April was Promise Boys by Nick Brooks. And as I showed before, this is the Waterstones edition, so it has like the sprayed edges, which is cool. This is a contemporary mystery. We are following these 3 young boys. 2 of them are Black and one of them is Latine. And this is set at a prep school. It's called Urban Promise Prep, and specifically its whole mission is like taking at-risk youth, specifically boys, and sort of like making them, you know, upstanding members of society, like keeping them out of trouble and giving them opportunities. And like this school is very well thought of by like the community. The principal is seen as this hero because like he's reaching out to these boys in need. But one day that principal is killed. He's murdered during the school day. And the three main suspects are our three main characters. And we're sort of like learning more about what happened and who did this. And so they eventually sort of meet up and decide like, well, everybody thinks we did it. We didn't do it. Let's figure out who did, so that, you know, we can prove our innocence. And as we go through the investigation and the story, we start learning some more things about the principal and about the school that kind of tarnish the positive image it has. I really, really loved this. Like, I have said before how I really enjoy when mystery books like handle themes or like certain kinds of like social justice issues and things like that. And this one definitely did that. Like the way it talks about race and kind of like respectability politics and like class and privilege, I just think is incredibly interesting. And I just think it gave like a really interesting perspective on it too, because we see how sometimes like starting out with good intentions isn't enough. One of the things I also loved is that it's told in, I guess, sort of mixed media format, because we get some emails, we get a couple of transcripts of like interviews and things like that. We have some like newspaper articles. Like a lot of the book is told in like regular prose, but we do have kind of sprinkled in these other media elements that I really liked. And I also thought this was really cool that like we have the three main boys that we're following, but we also get like short chapters from other characters, other like people around them. And I thought that really added to the story and to like the pace and the uncertainty of this mystery. And I personally liked the way that the like investigation or the like information reveals happened. Like there were some parts that I kind of like picked up on, but not in a way that was frustrating. It felt like I was figuring things out because the author did a good job of like setting things up, but there were still a few surprises too. So I feel like it was a good balance of that for me. Yeah, I just thought this was really excellent. I can see maybe some people not thinking that the ending is as strong, but for me it really worked. I gave Promise Boys 5 stars. Okay, everybody, so those were the books I read in April. Whichever catch-up wrap-up number this is, I don't know. Let me know if you have read any of these, what you thought, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!